I bought a 2012 MacBook Air for only $180 and it really surprised me. Now this thing is a MacBook Air and believe it or not, it comes with 8 gigs of RAM and 250 gigabytes of SSD, which is what the brand new M2 MacBook Airs come with 10 years later. And after having it for about a week, I want to share my experience using it with you guys, both the positives and things that surprised me, as well as the negatives and who should not buy it, and then who should buy it and I'll actually be very happy with it. It'll be better than other brand new options at low price points. Now, the first thing that really stands out is that massive bezel. With these new Macs coming out that have this super thin, even sides on the screen, well, this thing like blinds you with that silver bezel. Now, after using it for a bit, it does tend to kind of disappear, not completely because it's huge, but you start to ignore it a bit and it's not too bad. Now, as far as the overall design, it doesn't look that old because the wedge shape was around until, well, I guess it's still around with the M1 MacBook Air that's still being sold. The next thing was MagSafe. This thing had it way back then. Apple got rid of it. Thankfully, they brought it back. And the connector is very similar. It has that light on top. Now, the cable's not as nice as the new ones. It's not braided. And it is built into the power brick, so it's non-removable. But one thing we don't have in 2022 are these cool little clips that opened up. I use these all the time back in the day, and it makes it very convenient to wrap up your cable and keep it tidy. And another thing that I now miss is that iconic glowing Apple logo. It would be great if they could bring it back. There's just something cool about it when it turns on, it really pops out, and it doesn't smudge like the new silver ones. Now, what about usability day to day? Well, this thing has 2 USB ports and they are USB 3.0, which surprised me as well, so they aren't slow. And then we also have an SD card reader, which is handy to have. There's no reason why we couldn't have had that in the new M2 MacBook Air. Along with that, we have that MagSafe charger and we have a Thunderbolt port, which can actually daisy chain 2 displays together, which we also don't have. Now, I used to own a 2015 version of this and I definitely enjoyed it. I used it mostly for web browsing, a little bit of video editing, and doing the same thing with this one from 2012 actually did quite a good job. Websites loaded up surprisingly quickly, and because it has 8 gigabytes of RAM, I didn't really notice any sort of slowdowns for that simple kind of use. Now, I know a lot of you guys mentioned that the M2 MacBook Air with the stock 256 gig SSD, people won't notice the performance difference because they're just web browsing. Well, with this thing, it also web browses just fine. So if you're somebody that is just using email, maybe watching some YouTube videos, things like that, do you really need to spend that extra money? Now, of course, nobody's gonna stop you if you have it, but you don't need to. This thing handles all those basic tasks without any issues. For those of you guys that type a lot, it also does a pretty good job. We have the old school keyboard that so many people loved and wanted back once Apple released the butterfly keys. They're not as good as the new ones. The keys are a little bit on the smaller side, so it took me a bit to get used to that. But overall, they do feel good for typing. Now, let's go to some downsides. The trackpad has frustrated me. If you're somebody that is used to Apple's new Force Touch trackpads, going back to a diving board design, it just sucks. You have to press more towards the bottom, and then if you're off a bit, you can have some issues with right clicking, or you're pressing at the top and it's not registering because you have to click way harder. Now, of course, you can get used to that, but that's something that still stuck with me here even a week later. And the same thing goes for the speakers. There's huge modules in it, these big, huge enclosures, so you think it would sound good, but when we compared it with the new MacBook Air, well, just take a listen for yourself. The webcam is also a potato in 2022 terms. This might have been the biggest thing that kind of surprised me because it is a 720p webcam, but the processing was just terrible back then. So I would probably say you'd want to use something external if you're gonna be doing that. Now, with that, this thing can only update to macOS Catalina, so you're not gonna be able to use, some of the new features that are released on the new operating systems. You're not gonna get some security updates, so you definitely have to keep that in mind. And before I have to get into performance and what changing the thermal paste did, let's talk about this display. It almost hurt my eyes when I first looked at it, just because all the pixels popped out like crazy. And it's really interesting how our eyes get adjusted to new displays. It becomes our new normal, and displays that didn't look that bad before, they really look bad when you start looking at them again. Now, if you're just using this and no other Mac, you'll kind of get used to it. Not completely because the colors aren't great, but it definitely was the worst thing about these MacBooks, not in 2012 when this one launched, but at least up until 2017, which was the last one of this design. With that said, this thing was $180. Now, if we would looked at a year or two ago, it had been double the price, maybe more, but because of Apple Silicon, these old ones really dropped in value, which is great if you want to pick one up, maybe for yourself, a parent that you want using macOS instead of Windows so they don't get any viruses, maybe a kid. We had multiple people comment that their kids stopped using their Chromebooks that they got for free from school because their old MacBook was a lot better overall. Now, here in 2022, there are new Chromebooks, but if you're looking at that price point of about 180 bucks, you will get one of these, which is an 11-inch Chromebook that is very well rated, and it actually used to cost 280 bucks. It is on sale. Now, what does that offer you? Well, you get 4 gigs of RAM, you get 64 gigabytes of that super slow SSD storage, and the screen is no better, likely worse in terms of contrast than this MacBook Air. So that puts it into perspective. And I'll show you the performance as well here in a second. Now, the first thing that I noticed when I started using it was the fan. Even installing different applications, the fan would spin up and it would get loud. And then when I was looking at temperatures, those were also getting quite hot just doing simple tasks. Now, this was a bit annoying. It was a little bit frustrating and a little bit funny after using fanless MacBook Airs. Now, as we went through, we did some performance tests. I was thinking, well, what about the fans? There could be, dust in there. The thermal paste has been in there for 10 years. I don't know if the refurbishing company does any of that. And so after doing that, I decided to go ahead, pop it open, and replace the thermal paste, which literally cost about 10 bucks, and it's not hard to do at all. I'll go ahead and link some thermal paste and my little toolkit down in the video description. So what did that do? Well, the difference was way more than I expected. First off, the fan stopped spinning up. When I was using regular tasks, it stayed quiet, which was awesome. But then under load, instead of hitting 105, 106 degrees when running Cinebench or working with photos, it literally maxed out at 92 degrees Celsius when we were doing the Cinebench render, which is a massive difference. That is cooler than the new MacBooks run. And with that, we got about a 10% improvement in score as well. Now, as far as the graphics, this is where this thing gets slow. This is the biggest limitation with it. But those improved by about 23% after switching out the thermal paste. People used to spend hundreds of dollars to get a CPU upgrade to be able to get 10, 15, 20% of an improvement. So if you buy one of these, definitely make sure that you swap it out, not only for the performance gains, but for the fan noise as well. Now, our Geekbench score didn't get that much better because that does short bursts and it doesn't heat up your system very much. But with that, let's compare it to the Chromebook that you would buy for the same price. As far as single core score, this 2012 machine more than doubles it, and it also beats it out in multi-core score, even though that Chromebook has an 8-core processor. Of course, it also has double the RAM and 4 times the SSD. That is way faster than what is in that Chromebook. So realistically, if you can grab one of these for this price now, there is no reason to buy that Chromebook. And with that, you can upgrade the SSD in this thing up to 2 terabytes for about $200 or 1 terabyte for about $100. You get the proper SSD you can pop in. So that's another factor if you want to, get some more storage, or just buy an SD that will pop in and give you more storage, since this thing does have that SD card slot. Now, as far as battery life, this thing only had about 80 cycles on the battery. That means that the battery was swapped out before, which is great. And I think the refurbisher, they will swap them out if they're really bad. Or if you get one used, you can swap it out yourself for not a lot of money at all. I'll link a replacement kit as well. And you can expect roughly 6 or so hours with this machine. Now, it might be a little bit worse than a Chromebook, or maybe not, but that is definitely better than a $300 Windows laptop that you would buy today. So should you buy a $180 2012 MacBook Air in 2022? Well, I guess it depends on how much money you have to spend or who you're buying it for. For a kid or a parent, you can buy one of these, not have to worry about a bunch of Windows viruses or about them breaking an expensive machine, and it will do the job great for web browsing, Google Docs, things like that. They're gonna have a great time. Or if you don't have a lot of money to buy, say, an $850 M1 MacBook Air, and you need something, there's still a lot of people using these machines, and they do the job. Even for a little bit of light 1080p video editing in Final Cut, it can actually do that. Now, you don't want to do 4K. That destroys this machine because its biggest weakness are graphics. And then with that, if you're somebody who's going to listen to a lot of different things with the built-in speakers, of course you can use headphones or do Zoom calls. That is more of a limitation. But overall, what else can you buy for this price point that matches it up? Really nothing. And this really shows a testament to Apple and how long their machines last. And then with that, why in the world are we still getting 8 gig 256 in 2022? But that's for another video. So there you guys go. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Check out one of those great videos right over there. Click above to subscribe. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.